Hello everyone, thank you for coming today. I hope you're doing well. Before we begin the session, let me introduce myself. My name is Elika. I'm working as Project Manager of Insight Speaker Series at Wika. It is my pleasure to welcome you today as the host in this webinar session, talking about hiring the best talent, do it now. I'm very excited because later we will introduce our inspiring speaker and moderator. In this moment, I would like to say thank you to our partners, 1000 Startup Digital and ICT Ministry of Indonesia. Kumpul as our community partner, Zillion as our media partner, and also Selaksa as our event partner. This project will not be able to run without our partner support. We are very delighted to have you here in Insight Speaker Series, which will be held bi-weekly, with several topics around business, finance, marketing, and technology. As our current situation affected by COVID-19, many businesses and startups has been adjusting and maintain their business both in short and long-term action to survive this situation. That is the reason this webinar series is made, to help the government to support startups and business to survive and thrive in COVID-19 situation. The knowledge and experience will be delivered by international speakers and moderators from top-notch companies to share their perspective in business. Today, in this session, we will learn about how to find and select the best talent. Before we start, I'm going to explain the agenda. So after participant check-in, we have an opening and introduction as what we already have now. After that, we're going to have a presentation from Kevin Haldeman, our speaker. He is an associate staffing lead at Google. And then we're going to have Q&A session, which will be facilitated by our moderator, Vita Subiakti. If you have any question regarding our topic during the presentation, you don't have to wait until the end of presentation. You can just write it on Q&A chat box in Zoom, and then we will go through it later on Q&A session. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator for today's session. She's a secretary at Optimis International of the Southwest and the co-founder of Botica, a virtual assistant for small and medium social commerce. She is also active in MICTI, Indonesia Digital Creative Industry Community, in advocacy and partnership division that offers her a door to meet the person from top management of digital companies or ecosystem players, communities, and startups. She is Vita Subiakti. Thank you for sparing your time to be able to facilitate our discussion today.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Vita.
Hello. Thank you, Elika, for the time.
You're welcome.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Vita. So I read here in the chat, it's like many people already joining. It's like we have already Yen is from Brunei. Hi, Yen. How are you? And then you have also Furqan Jamil is from Bekasi. Hello, Furqan. And many here. So I cannot say hi one by one. So let's start our webinar today. Allow me to introduce our speaker for today. So as Elika already introduced before, that today we are having a very special person, experience in how to choose the right team for your startup. So please allow me introduce Kevin Haldeman. He's like for past 13 years, Kevin already worked in a variety of Fortune, like 500 companies, including Amazon, Verizon, and also Google for now, where he leads a recruiting team covering roles across Southeast Asia. And he's passionate about structured interviewing and assessment technique, incorporating a scientific approach into people decision. Currently, Kevin is based in Singapore, and he spent 11 years living and working in Japan, but somehow he's still not good at karaoke. So guys, if you want to hang around with Kevin, please skip the karaoke. So Kevin, please welcome and like to greet all the members here in the webinar today. Kevin, the time's for you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. And Vita, I didn't realize you were going to share the karaoke fact at the beginning here. So quite embarrassed to start things off. But I really appreciate all of you joining on a Saturday to talk about hiring, something I'm very passionate about. And I'm surprised to have so many people willing to spend their weekend to discuss this topic, but very happy to be here today. Thank you for joining.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. So, Kevin, what today you will, how to say, share with all of us? It's like what you will say.
Well, I'm going to be talking about, I guess, three main topics. First will be how to find talent, how to identify people to hire. The second topic will be about once you find them, how to interview them, how to assess them. And then finally, what does the hiring landscape look like right now? Obviously, a very unique environment this year for both companies and for employees. So I'll share a few of my thoughts on what it looks like right now. And then after that, we'll have a lot of time for questions, it sounds like.
Okay, about the third point. So for sure, you already aware about the, let's say, it's a global crisis now. So I hope, it's like after the first to find people and then second to assess where they're best in the position. So I hope in the third point, you will help us in how to deal with all this team during this pandemic.
I'll see what I can do. Yeah, happy to answer any questions there as well. Yep.
Okay, Kevin, please, we are going to listening you. The time is yours.
All right, great. Well, I'm excited to get started. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. As I mentioned, I'm going to be walking through these topics today: finding talent, assessing and selecting talent, the current landscape, and then lots of time at the end for questions. I guess first and foremost, obviously I'm very biased because recruiting and hiring is my main job. It's the thing that I get paid for. So I, of course, think that hiring is the most important thing that you do. But I also think that if you're a manager or if you're a recruiter in a company, hiring is the most important thing that all of your employees do. And it's because if you think about the amount of time that you spend to hire someone, the time that goes into interviewing before you actually decide to hire this person, you might spend only 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours interviewing someone before you give them an offer letter. And yet they're going to work at your company, hopefully for many years, right? 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. And so when you think about, how much time goes into meeting someone before you make that big decision, it's not a lot of time, right? For a decision that has a lot of impact. And when I talk about the impact, it's not just the impact that an employee will have when they join your company, but if you're a manager, for example, the people that you hire are going to impact how you spend your time as well, right? If you hire someone who turns out to not be so great, you're going to spend a lot of your time on reminding them, to follow up on tasks, giving them deadlines, following up, checking their work. A lot of things that we consider as management and not very exciting things. On the other hand, if you hire great people, then you can spend your time on more exciting things like empowerment, on strategy, on vision, on thinking about the future, and helping your team with their career goals. So when you hire, think about the impact not just on the company, not just the potential of the person that you're hiring, but also the potential on yourself and the other people that are in that company that they're going to work with. And when you take those things into consideration, hopefully everyone agrees that hiring is maybe, if not the most important thing you do, one of the most important things you do. So hopefully you agree with that. And maybe you're thinking like, yes, Kevin, like that's why I'm here, because I agree that hiring is a very important thing. But how do I find, great people? Like, how do I know who's actually good just from a couple of interviews, some casual chats maybe, how do I make that decision? And I'm going to talk about that, but before I do that, I have a pop quiz. Sorry to give you a test on a Saturday, but does anybody happen to know, this is related to hiring, by the way, it's not just random questions, but does anyone happen to know who are Google's founders? If you know, go ahead and type it into the chat.
Okay, everyone who know who is the Google founders, please raise the hand. You can Googling for a moment as well.
You can Google it, I guess. There we go. We've got one. Sergey Brin and Larry Page.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Okay, we have Joan Ko and also Furkan. So Joan Ko says Sergey Brin and Larry Page, and the Furkan Jamil says like Larry Page. So it's like two people agree in one thing.
Sergey Brin and Larry Page is correct. Well done. I'm not sure if you Googled it, but you did get the correct answer. So what about the next question? This is them, by the way. They met at Stanford University and about 22 years ago started Google. So that's an easy one. The second one is a little bit harder. Who was Google's first recruiter? I think even if you Google this one, might be difficult. Anybody know?
So again, anyone? Who was Google's first recruiter?
It was not me. I'll give you a clue. This is a bit of an unfair question, so I'm not expecting any correct responses here. It is a trick question, though. The reality is Google's first recruiter, actually first recruiters, were also Sergey Brin and Larry Page. Because guess what? When you're a startup, right, everyone is a recruiter, right? When you're two people, you're growing quickly. All of you are going to be recruiting, right? And when you get to 10 people, still everyone is a recruiter, right? A big part of a growing startup is that everyone is out there trying to find the next hires. You're growing quickly, you have too much work to do, not enough people, everyone is a recruiter. Even at 30, 40, 50 people, I think in many companies, everyone still has some recruiting responsibilities, right? But then what happens is, around 50 people or 100 people, sometimes 200 people, a company will go and hire a recruiter. And then everybody says, now that we have a recruiter, recruiting is not my job anymore, right? We've hired someone else to do it, so I can forget about recruiting and I can go on and do other things. And when I talk about tips for hiring, these are my top 5 tips for finding talent. My first tip is that you have to keep the culture that everyone in your company is a recruiter. No matter how big you get, everyone in the company, a part of their job should be recruiting. And if you lose that, around the time you become 100 people, it's really hard to get it back. So you need to set that culture up from day one. And one of the things that I like most about Google is that even though we're now more than 100,000 employees, there's still that philosophy that everyone in Google has a responsibility to continue to be looking for the next great hire. For your own team, for other teams, for future teams. It is a big part of the culture. And it's one of the reasons that we're able to hire well is because as we've grown, we've gotten better at recruiting because every person we hire has a network of other people that we could potentially hire. And so I would say that if your company hasn't created this as part of their culture yet, you should really focus on this as your #1 recruiting strategy from day one. And if you don't have it yet, you might want to spend some time with the leadership in your company to reestablish, this philosophy that it's very difficult to do on your own. Recruiters are not a silver bullet for hiring, right? Most recruiters use the same job sites, they use the same tools, the same strategies. They don't know everyone in the market. And so they're not going to be able to solve every hiring need on their own. And they really need the partnership from the rest of the people in the company whose core job is not recruiting to help with that. And so when you hire, if you haven't done so already, when you hire your first recruiter, you should tell people that this is not our first recruiter. This is our first full-time recruiter, who 100% of their job is recruiting. But the reality is everybody else here is still a recruiter, whether it's 5% or 10% or 20%. And I think that, you should instill that philosophy as soon as possible if it's not there already. Second tip here is that recruiting can happen anytime and anywhere. I'll use myself as an example. Actually, when I got hired at Google, I didn't apply for the job. And actually, Google didn't seek me out for the job either. What happened was I was invited to attend an event that was held at Google's office. And it was an event about HR. It was an HR topic. And so I said, oh, this is interesting. Like, I'm eager to go and learn more about this. So I signed up for the event. And then the day before the event organizer emailed me and said, hey, Kevin, one of our speakers had to cancel and they're not able to make it tomorrow. Can you speak instead? And I said, oh, what's the topic again? And they told me the topic again. And I said, well, probably I can throw something together. And so I did. I made just a couple of slides and I presented at the event the next day. And I didn't think anything of it after that. But about 2 weeks later, one person from Google who attended that event sent me a message and said, hey, have you ever thought about working at Google? And I said, well, no, I didn't know that I would even be considered, to work at Google. And that's how it started. Of course, I still had to interview and do these kinds of things, but they found me through something that was not related to recruiting at all. I don't know if they were seeking people out specifically by holding that event, but that's how I ended up getting a job. And especially these days, in this kind of environment where we're not meeting up, in person, it's actually getting easier to attend events, right? You don't have to commute. You don't have to go to a physical location to attend an event. You can just sign up, join by Zoom, and you can be there at that event. So I think that similar to the first topic, everyone, of course, can be a recruiter by joining these events, but you can also host your own events, right? If you're a small company, if you're a startup, you can start up an event, invite other industry professionals, and it doesn't have to be a recruiting event, right? It doesn't have to be like the focus of this event is we're going to be interviewing people and assessing people. The event can be about any kind of topic related to your business or emerging trends in the business. It can be you can have other people like experts in the field talking about their thoughts there, and you might just meet someone. Maybe it's not even someone at that event that you're going to hire now, but maybe it's someone you could hire 6 months from now, or 12 months from now, or 2 years from now. But I think that having that mindset that recruiting can happen anytime, anywhere, and also letting your team members know that part of their job should be going out to events, if not hosting events, so that they can continue to identify people through those kinds of media. So, a lot of people think that you can only recruit, by the people who apply or the people that you seek out. A lot of job boards are quite expensive to use. So some of these events can be a great alternative to that. All right, the third tip is consider transferable skills. So what I noticed in my own hiring and when I've looked at how other companies hire is when they want to hire someone, by far the thing that they look for the most is, can we find someone who's done this job at a competitor? Basically, we want to find someone who's already doing this current job. We want them to come to our company and do the job at our company. It's the easiest way to know, with confidence, like, I think this person can do this job because they've done it before. And I would encourage you to question that philosophy. Is that really the best way to hire? Is that really the best way to find the top people? Because for one, like if someone is already doing that job at a competitor, why do they want to change and do that job at your company? Maybe it's because they're not doing very well, at their current company, or maybe there's other reasons that are not just because they're excited about the opportunity in your company. It could be, it could be something else. So think about, what is really needed for this job that we're hiring for? Do we need someone who, from day one, can do this full job 100%? Or can we hire someone that has potential? And if we train them for a month or 2 months or 3 months, they'll be able to do this job. And maybe because we've hired for someone who's just really smart, really intelligent, like good problem-solving skills, creative, that kind of person, even if they haven't done the exact job before, can be trained to do that job. And many times they'll be able to do that job better than other people who've done it before. And again, I've seen this happen in my team. When I hire recruiters for my own team, I've hired recruiters who have no experience with recruiting at all. They come from a sales background, or they come from a marketing background or consulting background. And sometimes they really surprise you, because I already have some recruiters in the team who know recruiting, right? And they can help, they can teach, they can mentor anyone who comes into the team who's new. But when you hire someone who comes from a different background, like I said, they're going to learn the skill, but they're also going to bring other skills with them, like how they interact with hiring managers, what they know about the business. And those skills can help them to be, even better than people who've been recruiting for 5 or 10 years and know, well, this is how you usually do this. Someone who's coming from a different background will say, well, maybe there's another way. And you'll be surprised if you hire those kinds of people and find like, wow, this is something, I never would have considered on my own, but because they're coming from a different background, they were able to come up with some unique, novel solutions. So consider that when you're hiring, that you don't need to hire someone who's doing the exact same job somewhere else. Fourth, don't sacrifice quality for speed. So the reality is, if you're hiring, usually it means that you have some kind of immediate need, right? There's something, some work that needs to be done urgently, and either you don't have the skills to do it, or maybe people in the team do have skills, but they just don't have enough time. So if that's the case, you tend to prioritize speed when hiring. We need to hire someone ASAP so that I can delegate, some of my work to them. I'm too busy. I need to hire someone so they can do some of that work. And I would again encourage you to, think about when you're hiring this person, you're not just hiring them for the problem that's happening right now. You're hiring them for the problem that's happening 6 months from now, or 12 months from now, or 2 years from now. And if you hire someone just based on, okay, like maybe they're not the best person, but they can start quickly and they can take this, they can take this responsibility and solve it quickly. And if you do that over and over, it's going to result in a team that's not suited to solve tomorrow's challenges. It's a team was hired to solve yesterday's challenges. And so I would think that rather than focusing on the person who's the best for whatever problem you have now, take a bit more time and think about who's the person who's going to solve, who just has a good approach to problem solving that will help us solve a wide variety of problems in the future, not just what we have right now, even if it's going to take a little bit more time, even if you think that it's urgent because you have some work that needs to be done very quickly. Last is to measure what's working and what isn't. This is especially true if you're hiring at high volumes. I think a lot of teams, when they hire, after they've made the hire, they just forget about it. They never look back and see, did we do a good job of hiring? Were we successful in making this hire? And so there's a lot of things you can do retroactively to find out, how you're doing with hiring. And one thing is to go back, 6 months or 12 months after a person has joined and read the feedback, if you're taking notes while you're interviewing, and say, is what we thought, this person's strengths and weaknesses, are those things that we thought were their strengths and weaknesses actually true? Or did we miss something? Was there any kind of warning sign that maybe if we had probed this area, we could have noticed it and avoided, making a mistake? Or did we find out that this person has some amazing skills that we didn't even know about when we interviewed them because we didn't check these areas? And if you go back and find those things, you can calibrate your interview process in the future to try and find more of those things. Also, for the ways that you identify people, you can go back and look at what was the source of all the people that we hired. Did we hire a lot of people from events? Did we hire a lot of people from referrals? Did we hire a lot of people from applications? And depending on which channel is working the best, you might want to invest more in that channel in the future. Or you might find out that this particular source was not very efficient, but the people that we hired turned out to be amazing. And so maybe, even though it takes more effort, we should invest more resources in using that channel to identify people in the future. But if you don't measure it, you'll never know, and you'll just be guessing every time new roles open. So those are my 5 tips for finding. I know we had time for questions at the end, so if nothing urgent, I'll just move to the next slide after I take a deep breath. Okay. All right. Assessing and selecting. So you might say, okay, we've found people, but how do we know once we interview them if they're any good? We have their resume, we think they're good, but how do we actually know? And this is one of the reasons that I joined Google, actually. Before I joined Google, I've been working for about 10 years, recruiting for other companies. And something I noticed was that, when we hire someone, at the time of hiring them, of course, we think that they're amazing, right? Every hire that we make, we think is going to be excellent. But in reality, after people join, you have a real mix, right? Some are superstars, some are, not so good, and there's a lot in between. And why is that? Why can't we know that ahead of time? Why are we so bad at predicting, how people are going to actually perform when we interview? And I got really interested in, what can you do in the interview process to get better at predicting someone's actual performance? So that's what I'm going to talk about in the next slide. Okay, so these are the common assessment criteria I think that many companies use. We talked about one already, which is relevant experience or years of relevant experience. There's a couple other here. Credentials. This is things like what university did you go to? What were your grades? Do you have any certificates? References. Is the CEO of some company referring this person? We look at their personality. Are they charismatic? Are they outgoing? Are they fun to talk to? We look at their interests and hobbies. Do they play the same sports that I do, or are they interested in the same things that I am? And then intuition and gut feeling, right? A lot of times when an interview finishes, I, as a recruiter, will talk to the interviewer and I'll say, what did you think of this person? And they'll reply, oh, I really like them. Well, what did you like about them? I just have a feeling, I just have a feeling that this person is great. And this is what many companies use, to decide should we hire or should we not hire. And what I would say is that in Google, we go back and we do measure a lot of these attributes, and we look at what has been successful, what has actually been a good predictor of performance. And we have found that these 6 things here almost have no predictiveness of actual performance. It's any of these things here have almost no correlation with how well or how poorly somebody does once they join. So as much as it might be fun for you to hire people that have great credentials or similar interests and hobbies, or that you just have a feeling about, I think that there's a better way. And I'm going to talk about a little bit of Google's own research as well as some academic research about what actually is a good predictor of eventual performance. All right. So there's 3 things here that I'll cover. And again, these are things that we found through our own hiring as well as academic research. If you want to copy the link at the bottom, you can read it for yourself. It's a 40-page document that I refer to quite often, which talks about hiring. But by far, the best predictor of performance for just about any knowledge worker, professional job, is general cognitive ability, or some people say general mental ability, which is basically your problem-solving skills, learning skills, judgment, ability to learn new things and apply those things quickly. So that is by far the best predictor of performance. Every other predictor of performance pales in comparison to that. So if you're only going to check one thing, this is the one thing that you want to check. The second best predictor is integrity tests. And it's interesting because it maybe doesn't seem obvious that this would be the second best predictor, but one of the reasons it's a very good predictor is because it has almost no overlap with general cognitive ability. So if you're testing for general cognitive ability plus one other thing, these are almost like mutually exclusive, which means that it's going to give you a much better sense of if the person is holistically going to be a good hire. So this tests for things like sincerity, fairness, honesty, maybe even like humility. So integrity tests are the second best predictor in conjunction with general cognitive ability. And then the third thing here is not actually an attribute, but it's more a way of doing interviews. It's the how of interviewing. And it's basically to use structured interviews. So this is something, again, I think a lot of companies or a lot of managers don't do this. They see, oh, I have an interview at 2 p.m. Okay, at 1:55, they start thinking about, what am I going to ask this person? They start looking at the resume, and then when they go into the interview, it's just a series of random questions. And usually those questions are, have you done a similar job before? And do you want to do that job at our company? Instead of doing that, if you really want to get a strong signal, you need to use structured interviews. And what that means is you need to decide in advance what are the attributes that you're going to be testing for? What are the questions that are going to give you a sense of whether or not someone is strong in those attributes? And how are you going to measure their responses? You need to decide all those things before you go to the interview. And then you need to make sure that when you interview candidates, you're asking them a consistent set of questions so that you can kind of compare, that what does a good response look like? What does a bad response look like? And keep in mind that sometimes you can have a good response that's actually a wrong response, right? A wrong answer can still be a reasonable answer. So you wouldn't necessarily reject someone just because of an answer that's incorrect, because it still could be a good answer. In an interview, no one's perfect. I saw a question there in the chat about how would you test for integrity? Great question. I'm going to cover that in, I think, the next slide. Oh no, one slide before that. I will cover that. I will cover that answer to that question though. Just give me a few minutes. So when we look at a couple of companies, I'll talk about Google as well. A couple of big companies here, Traveloka, we've got Tokopedia, AWS or Amazon. You'll see that they actually have these attributes listed on their website. And these are the things I assume. Well, I've worked at Amazon, but not the other companies. I assume that in their interviews, they're asking questions related to these things, right? They have a predetermined criteria that they're looking for. And when you go into the interview, you can expect questions around intellectual honesty, curiosity, humility, or at AWS about invent and simplify, which might be related to like general cognitive ability. Some of these things like focus on the customer, growth mindset, make it happen, make it better. These companies have all determined in advance, what does success look like in our company? And when they interview, they're going to be asking questions. So if you're preparing to interview at any of these companies, you should check these attributes and try to anticipate what they're going to be asking before you actually go there, so that you have a better chance to respond to those. And at Google, this is not like private information. This is not confidential. This is public information. These are the attributes that we look for. So we look for the general cognitive ability, role-related knowledge. I mentioned before that it's not something you want to rely on completely, but also you want to find out, if someone doesn't have the role-related knowledge, can they pick it up, or do they have other knowledge that could be transferable to this skill? So we say role-related knowledge rather than role-specific knowledge, because you might find someone who has not done sales before, but maybe they have experience with negotiation, or maybe they have experience with interacting with senior, like C-level stakeholders. That could be role-related knowledge for a sales role, even though it's not sales-related knowledge or sales-specific knowledge. We look for leadership, and leadership doesn't just mean like leading teams or managing people. Leadership can be things like, can you get things done? Leadership can be, can you work as a team, right? Can you build a team? Sometimes can you lead from the back rather than leading from the front? We also consider, like, do you strive for self-development? Do you, continuously try to improve? We think that's a sign of leadership. And then the last attribute, googliness. We always get a question, what does that mean? This also, like, if you look around, you can find the official definition of this, but this is things like, do you value feedback, from your colleagues? Are you good with ambiguity? Can you challenge the status quo? Do you do the right thing, right? And do you care about the team? This is what we consider to be googliness. And so when we interview at Google, we ask questions specifically around those 4 categories. And we discourage managers from asking questions about anything else that's not related to those things. So, when I, as an interview for my team, I'll usually choose a couple of these attributes, and I'll determine in advance what questions do I want to ask that are going to help me assess these attributes. And that's what I focus on in the interview. Rather than just something I'm curious about, I have to think, these are the things that are good predictors of performance. And so I'm going to focus my interview on those attributes rather than other random attributes that I'm curious about. So now we get to the question. Hopefully this will start to answer the question that was asked in the chat, which is, how do we actually assess these kinds of things? What questions are going to be good for assessing this? And there's a lot of misperceptions about this, so I'll spend quite a bit of time on this today. When we look at this first attribute, so the attribute is problem solving, judgment, structured thinking, general cognitive ability. And here's a question that actually some big companies may be asking. And I'll read the question. It says, you have a 3-liter bucket and a 5-liter bucket. How would you measure exactly 4 liters of water using only these 2 buckets? So this is a question that Google used to ask. Who thinks this is a good question? Anybody think this is a good question for assessing those attributes? You don't actually have to answer. This one is a rhetorical question, but in reality, Google used to ask these kinds of questions in our interview. And what we found is that the ability to answer this kind of like brain teaser question has no predictiveness of someone's actual performance. When we hired, thousands of people, some of whom did well on this question, some of whom did not do well on this question, it had no predictiveness of someone's actual performance once they joined the company. And so again, by measuring that, we were able to determine that this is not a good question, and we stopped asking it. It's a fun question to ask, right? Because maybe if you know the answer, you can kind of see, like, is this person going to be able to figure it out? It's it's just fun to know, like, I know the answer. Let's see if they can guess at what it is. But we shouldn't be interviewing for entertainment, right? We should be interviewing for, is it going to be a good predictor of performance? So the question that we would ask instead, it's a very boring question, but we would say something like, tell me about a complex problem that you've recently solved. Walk me through your thought process. What was the situation? What options did you consider? And how did you decide on a final solution? It's boring, right, compared to the first question. But the reason it's a good question is because it's boring. it's very difficult to fake an answer to this, right? Someone has to think of an actual example. They have to talk you through, like, what was the problem? Why did I approach it this way? What options did I consider? And they're going to have to explain that to you. And that's going to be very relevant to future problems, right? Whatever problem they have, if they join your company, you want to know how are they going to approach it. You can't get a right or a wrong answer to every problem, but what's important is how do they approach problems if they've never faced those kinds of problems before. So by asking a question like this, you can really understand their thought process, and then you'll be able to see, could they apply the same process to other problems? And that's a really good predictor of performance, right? If they have a really good thought process for solving complicated problems. And you'll ask them follow-up questions, right? You can come up with, like, for me, when I interview, a 1-hour interview, I usually only have 4 main questions. And then each of those questions has a bunch of follow-up questions. So depending on how they answer, I might ask follow-up questions like, if you could go back again, and start over from the beginning, what would you do differently? And that, that will give me an indication of, after they finish work, do they ever think about it again? Or it's just like, that's done, let's move on. I want someone who thinks through and says, how could I have done better? What could I have done differently that could have got a better result? So those kinds of questions could be good follow-up questions. Like I said, it's a boring question, but it's going to give you a much better indication of whether someone's going to be a good top performer or not. We'll do one more. So the next attribute, this might be like in different companies will have a different word for it, but self-awareness, self-improvement, continuous development. And in a lot of companies, a question that they'll ask is, what's your biggest strength? Or what's your biggest weakness? Or what are your 3 biggest weaknesses? Or what would your boss say is your biggest weakness? Or these kinds of things. What do you think about this? Is it a good question or a bad question? I would say it is not a good question. For one, everyone's prepared for this question, right? Everyone can anticipate that this question is coming up, and their answer is going to be something that they've rehearsed ahead of time. No one's going to give you like a really true answer, right? No one's going to say, my biggest weakness is that when I get stressed, I get angry and throw things, right? No one's going to say that in an interview, even if it's true. So why ask the question? You're not going to get an honest answer. So we would say, rather than asking this question, you might ask a question like this. Tell me about some developmental feedback that you received from a boss or a coworker. What did you do to address it? How can you measure if you've improved? And again, someone could make up an answer that, oh, my boss says that I'm too detail-oriented, or my boss says I work too hard, or something like that. These are, again, fake answers. And you'll have to redirect them. You'll say, no, I'm looking for, really developmental feedback, something that you're not good at that you really need to improve. Feedback that you got could be very difficult feedback, and you'll want to see how they answer that. And if they still avoid the question, that's also giving you good information, right? It says maybe this person doesn't have much humility. Maybe this person isn't very transparent. Maybe this person is not focused on self-development. But hopefully, you'll get them to talk about, some real developmental feedback that they got and how they addressed it. They might say that, some of my teammates have said that I'm stubborn. Once I make up my mind, it's very difficult for me to change my mind. And when I heard that feedback, I was quite surprised, because I didn't think that, I consider myself a very open-minded. But I decided, I'm going to look into this, and I'm going to ask other people, have you felt this way before? Or, seek out some of my friends and say, have you seen this before? Seek out some of my other coworkers or previous bosses and ask them, have you noticed this for me? And if they have, then I need to look into it and say, what steps can I take, to combat this? What steps can I take to fix this perception? And you'll get a much better answer that tells you a lot more about this person than the first question, what is your biggest weakness? So this is true for any of those questions. You asked about integrity before. So again, you'll ask a question maybe from their experience. You'll say, tell me about a time when you had to make an unpopular decision, or tell me about a time when you had to make an easy choice that might have been morally questionable versus a difficult choice that's going to take more work, but morally right. How did you decide what to do? You'll ask them for an actual example, or you can give them a hypothetical example to say, what if you face this kind of situation where you have a deadline, you need to get something done, and you need to make a decision that's going to challenge your integrity? What would you do in that situation? and get them to walk you through that. So you can find questions online. I think there's books about it, but if you search for those either hypothetical or behavioral questions, they'll give you a much better sense of someone's, any of those attributes, whether it's integrity or problem-solving skills, by asking them, to walk through an example, whether it's hypothetical or behavioral. All right, check my time. Coming to the end here. I'll go over a few more slides here. So the current landscape, this is my impression. For my job, I look after Southeast Asia, and I think it is different in different countries in Southeast Asia. But in general, these are three things that I see happening right now. One is that a lot of companies right now are playing it safe. They're in a wait and see mode. When you hire, it's an investment. And right now, they're not sure, is this investment going to pay off? Because we don't know what's going to happen in the economy. And so some companies are reluctant to make those kinds of investment hiring decisions right now, and they're going to wait and see. But that means that it's an opportunity for other companies, right? If a lot of companies are waiting and seeing, there's still this, the talent is still out there. There's still people that are looking for jobs, and maybe fewer companies that are looking for those people. So it actually can be a great opportunity for companies that are looking to hire, because there's talent out there that's potentially looking to work. And some of the typical companies that you might be competing with for that talent are maybe not looking for talent right now. So you could have a real advantage right now if you're looking to hire while others are not. Second is that workers are split. Realistically, employees also are going through a very unique situation with the economy and with this global pandemic. And for some of them, they're saying that now is not the time to look for a new job. Now is the time for stability. So many other things in life right now are unstable. For my job, I want it to be stable. And no matter what offer they get, no matter what company contacts them, they're not going to want to change their job, because just too many other things to be stressed out about. And changing your job can be stressful. On the other hand, there's other people that are saying, like, you know what, there's a lot of disruption happening right now, and I want to be a part of that disruption. Now is an opportunity to find new ways of doing things, right? Travel is shifting, and the way people shop is shifting. These are all opportunities that you can get it on the ground floor, right? This year has been very difficult, but it's also created opportunities, and there are some people that are very eager to take advantage of those opportunities. And you may be looking for that kind of person, and they're out there for sure. Last is about mission, values, culture. These are all critical things in terms of like employer branding, employer value proposition when you're looking to hire. People join companies in many cases because they're inspired by a company's mission, values, and culture. And that's not changing at all. I think that's still consistent this year, even despite all the other changes that are happening around the world. But I would say one thing that is getting more important is flexibility. Of all the things that you can do to set yourself apart from other companies or competitors, is offering that flexibility. People need it more than ever, and they want to go work for a company that's going to acknowledge that this is a difficult year. People are going through very unique times, and if we allow people to work remotely or work from their hometown rather than wherever the office headquarters is, or work 80% instead of 100%, if you can offer that kind of flexibility to employees, I think it will reward the company in the long run through loyalty, through job satisfaction, and people will just want to work for a company that sees them as humans and takes into account the external factors and tries to make work for the employees, not just to work for the company. So if there's one thing you can do to attract talent in this time, I think it's to have a really good philosophy around the flexibility, being very flexible to allow people to work in many different ways. And like I said, I think it will. That's an investment that will pay off for companies that subscribe to that. So I think I'm probably pretty close to 30 minutes of speaking. You might be tired of my voice by now, but we'll pivot now to answering any other questions that you have. And I think we've got 20 or 30 minutes.
Okay, so Kevin, thank you. You share a lot of things with us. So if I may refresh a little bit, before we have Furqan that actually in the middle of your presentation, he asked you a question. Is how to say, it's like a Furkan asking, how about this one is, let me see from the chat. Okay, so in here, Furkan is like asking, how to assess the integrity of the team that you are going to recruit. So before he asking in the moment when you are like you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points in how to recruit people. So how to find the people. So he asks you how to assess the integrity. Sorry, it's like after you find the people. So what is the most point?
Yeah, integrity. I think there's a lot of different questions, but I think the best way to ask it's two ways. If you ask about an experience in the past where you had to make a difficult decision, you had to make a difficult choice, and to decide, did they make sort of the right choice, the just choice, or did they focus on, like in a sales role, for example, maybe you can make a sale by saying some things that are not entirely true, or you can be honest and say, well, this is the reality of this particular product, and you can make a decision based on that. And ask someone, when you've had to make that difficult kind of decision, how did you approach it? What did you do? Or you can ask a hypothetical question. If you faced this kind of situation, you're behind on your target, there's 1 week left in the quarter, you're dealing with this client, this kind of situation happens, what would you do? And see how they answer those kinds of things. So these kinds of questions, of course, people can kind of get a sense of what's correct, but doesn't mean you shouldn't ask. I think a combination of examples of the past where they've had to make decisions like ethical dilemmas, or hypothetical examples of an ethical dilemma that they might actually face in your company, and what would they do? Those are the kind of questions you can ask to assess integrity.
So it's like another way to say that how to answer Furkan is like how to assess the integrity is like to throw them back about some question that will, how to say, like reflect how they're reacting, and we will knowing how is the real character, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not a trick question. It's really just giving them an example of a situation that would test their integrity and seeing how they do, either hypothetically or how they actually did when they faced that situation in the past.
Okay. Furkan, is it clear for you, the answer from Kevin? You can type here. Okay. For a moment, we have here Stephen. So in here, Stephen is asking, what do you think about a college student apply for a job offer abroad right after the graduation? It's like a, how to say, like a fresh graduate. So just after the graduation, it's like apply a job overseas.
Yeah, well, I did that, so I would say that I highly recommend it. I think it's a great. I actually think it's a great thing, because what's the worst that can happen? Earlier in your career, you go abroad. If it doesn't work out, you can come back, to your home country, and if you've only got 2 years of experience, that's fine. You have lots of time to correct, that mistake if it doesn't go well. On the other hand, it can open a lot of doors, right? It could be the start of, big international career where you travel around for many years, or you get some unique perspectives by working with people, different from people you've worked with in the past. And I think that, many large companies are interested in people who have that, different perspectives that you gain from working abroad or living abroad. So yeah, for me, I think that would be a very good signal that you would get from, seeing someone's resume that after they graduated, they immediately went overseas to work. I think that would be a desirable attribute. Yeah, I don't think there's too much risk to it, to be honest. Even if it doesn't go well, you have a lot of time to, correct that mistake in the future.
Thank you. So Stephen, is that clear for you? Another thing is like maybe additional question for what Stephen asked to you, Kevin. I would like to know. So for this, is it, don't care, is the fresh graduate or everyone that already have the job experience before? So my question is, does the a grade point average, the GPA, is really matter to be considered by the recruiter nowadays?
Yeah, that's actually a very difficult question. I think it's a good question. So I think it can still be a signal, right? When you're looking at hiring, I would say, especially when you're hiring new grads, you don't have a lot of information, right? They don't have any work experience. They haven't, done a lot of things that you can ask them about to see their problem solving approach. And so grade point average is a signal. I wouldn't say that it's a very good signal, right? It's not a very strong predictor of performance. And in fact, again, when we look at within Google, we look at the top performers and the median performers. There's no correlation between their grade point average or their university and how well they perform once they join the company. It doesn't mean that those things don't matter at all, because again, this is people who've passed the interviews at Google, and then we look at university and grade point average. But in general, it's not a good signal. But if someone is a recent graduate, you just don't have many other signals to look at, and you need some kind of criteria that you can use to, you have 100 different CVs. How are we going to decide? We can't interview all of them. Maybe you look to grade point average as one signal. So I think it's okay to use it for new grads. Once someone has 3 years experience or 5 years experience, it doesn't matter at all. You should be asking about their experience rather than about their grade point average. And I would say even for new grads, yes, you might use grade point average as one criterion for assessing them, but I would also encourage you to interview some candidates that don't have a high grade point average and ask them about it. When you interview, ask them, hey, your grades are not so great, tell me why. And you might find out, like some people, I'm the first in my family, to go to university, and I was working 2 jobs part-time the entire time I was in university. And so I didn't have, a lot of spare time to focus on my studies. To be honest, like that kind of person to me would be very interesting. This is someone who really had to struggle to get where they are and probably overcome a lot of obstacles to get where they are. Maybe their grade point average is low, but they probably have a lot of other attributes that would be desirable for a company. So yeah, short answer is you can use grade point average for recent graduates, but don't rely on it too heavily, and also try to consider some other profiles as well that might have different kind of experience rather than just high grades. A lot of other things can go into making someone a top performer.
Okay, it's like you are trying to say that the GPA actually is not represent the real talent of the, how to say, the people that trying to apply the job.
Yeah, I mean, it does tell you something. Like, to get a high grade point average, you have to be a hard worker. Probably you have to have some level of intelligence to get there. But I would say that having a low GPA doesn't necessarily mean that you're not intelligent. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're not a hard worker. So it can give you some positive signals if they have a high GPA, but a low GPA is not necessarily a sign of, a warning sign or a red flag.
Okay, thank you. Stephen, is that clear for you? Or you will ask another thing? Clear. Okay, he said clear. Thank you. Okay, the next, we have Fena Marliasari, sorry. So she asked, the number of people working in the GIG economy has been growing in recent years. Okay, so I want to know what is the recruiting strategy to engage the like a GIG workers?
Sorry, to engage what workers?
So,
I couldn't hear the last word.
Sorry. So she say the number of the people that working in the gig economy has been like growing in recent years. I want to know what is the recruiting strategy to engage the workers.
To engage gig workers, that's probably something I don't have a lot of expertise in. It's not something that I've experienced as a recruiter. Do you mean like for engaging gig workers to try to recruit them to be gig workers for your company, or to recruit them into other kinds of jobs? Maybe you can clarify.
In here, really mention what is she just saying. It's like maybe in a general, yeah, because it's many people now is under like independent contract, right?
Yeah. I'll be honest, like this is probably not my area of expertise. So rather than give you a wrong answer, I might have to defer to someone else to take that one in the future. Sorry, it's probably not.
Okay, so let's make it easy. So how to say, a lot of online platform workers, like a lot of how to say, like a marketplace that the people can how to say, showing what they can do as the talent, and then the people that need their service is like they just go there, and then it's like hiring them under, it's like online everything. So I think what Fena trying to ask is like, because nowadays is the trend that the people is like put the talents and everything like how to say, like a outsourcing thing, because they just put, they can work anywhere, so they put in the marketplace, and then a lot of company is like using their, how to say, their talents to do what the company offer instead of hiring a people in the company. So in this case, I'm not really clear. Fena is as what, as the company, or that going to, how to say, going to recruit the gig workers, or she's one of them is what I don't understand. But maybe we can help her. It's like a or maybe Fena would like to saying in the chat what you really want to ask is like a you as what, your play as what.
I mean, just I guess on gig workers in general. Yeah, I mean, if a company is trying to solve their challenges by hiring very temporary, like short-term kind of solutions, like you may be able to get by with that in the short term, but I do think there's a lot of value in hiring full-time workers instead. Even when I think about recruiters, you could probably hire someone to recruit for a couple of weeks at a time, and you might get a couple of hires out of doing that. But when you have someone who's worked in the company for a couple of years, they build up that institutional knowledge, they build those internal networks, and I think there is a lot of value to that. So there are some jobs that I think it makes sense to have gig workers doing those jobs, but I think there are a lot of jobs that you should be investing in the people so that you get a return on investment over time, rather than just short-term contracts. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's some general thoughts on that topic.
Okay, so I'm trying to chat the Fena. Maybe Fena will read later. So in my experience, maybe I will share a little bit what is my experience when I recruit to engage the gig workers. I always using which company or it's like which project they already do. It's like and then maybe it's like have some, how to say, like a portfolio project that already we can see something. It's like to know if you are really good or not. In my experience like that, but I mean, I don't know, maybe another company will be different. So Fena, if you read this, if you still have something that maybe I cannot explain clearly, please, you can chat in the text box, please. Okay, meanwhile, how to say, it's like waiting, Fena, I would like to ask you one more thing. So Kevin, before you are talking about that, it's important to find how to say, to find the right people. Yes, as to hire the wrong person or revise the quality for the speed. And then my question is, does the background check of the candidate is really necessary in the beginning of the hiring process?
Background check. Sorry, the connection broke up a little bit there, but is a background check necessary in the beginning of the process? I mean, I think you should do background checks, just in case. You usually don't get a lot of quality information from background checks. Reference checks, I think, can be good if you ask the right kind of questions. If you just look at a reference check as ticking boxes, do you recommend this person? what score would you give them out of 10, you're probably not going to get a lot of great information. But if you ask specific questions about, tell me the most impactful work you've seen this person do, you might get some good information from reference checks. Background checks are more just, are there any real red flags that we should be aware of before we hire this person? A combination of those can be useful.
Okay, another question that is actually maybe connection to the landscaping is like the third point. So you are saying about that a lot of company in the like a very slow hiring, how to say, it's like a wait and see. So
Yes.
nowadays is like let's say, it's not, I hope it's not taboo to say it, but it's like a lot of people lose the job nowadays. Yes. So how to say, how to know that it's the right time to recruit?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, first, like it's well known that a lot of big companies that are big these days, were started during a recession, right? So it's very clear that many companies do take advantage of when the economy is difficult, creating something new. There are opportunities to create something new. So yes, some companies may be reducing their staff, but that can be an advantage for other companies. And so the companies that see opportunity should take advantage of that. Now would be a great time for them to hire to become the next big company, because you do have an advantage over those bigger competitors who may be reducing staff or not hiring these days. I think for people as well who have been impacted by layoffs or reductions in staff, it's important. This will pass, right? The economy will get better eventually, and I think one thing that probably recruiters can do and managers can do better is, often when you look at a resume, if you see that there's some kind of gap, a lot of people say, oh, that's a red flag. Why was this person unemployed? Maybe that's a risk to hire them because you don't know what happened. But I think now's a good time to remember that we've all known great people who lost their jobs, and it wasn't because they did something bad. It's just because the economy is, not able to support that job these days. So I would say that, what we all can do is when economy picks up again, if you get those kind of resumes that, include someone who maybe has a gap because they were unemployed for a while, consider that it's not just because maybe they made a mistake. It's likely because it was external factors that just made this happen. And so I think, companies right now, if they are hiring, should be looking for people that might have been impacted, that lost their jobs from other, good companies. And in the future as well, when you see those kinds of resumes, just know that, it doesn't happen, doesn't mean that they're a bad person because they lost their job. Plenty of good people, plenty of very excellent workers have also lost their job these days. And, we should overlook that when considering if they could be considered for other jobs in the future.
Okay. And then it's like now we have Furqan again. So Furqan asks you one thing. So what kinds and characters of CV do you prefer to look at? So I'm curious, maybe Furqan going to apply in Google?
Welcome, please. Sorry, I'm not joining this as a recruiting strategy for my own team, but Google, we do have a high bar for hiring, but we also look for a very diverse group of people. So we're not just looking for people who've done, like I said, the exact same thing at other companies. Sometimes we look for people who've taken a very unique path or who might bring a unique perspective. So I can't say that there's one particular thing that we look for, but we might look for, whatever situation you found yourself in, did you make the most of it? Whatever company you found yourself in, did you find ways to do innovative things? Did you find ways to overcome challenges? Whatever the context is there. If you're the type of person who, looks for big challenging problems and comes up with creative ways to solve them, that in general is the type of attribute that we look for. But it can show up in so many ways on a CV. I can't say that we look for these specific things. Because we're always looking for different things, and we look for the right combination of things, the right combination of people to come together. So sorry, it's not a very specific answer, but I would say that people who are excited about big challenges, who like to think creatively about how to solve those, who can challenge the status quo, follow through, who can get buy-in from people around them, who can work as a team to get things done. All those kinds of things would be attributes that we look for in one form or another on a CV.
Okay. About the CV letter itself, how do you like to read CV letters?
Like the cover letter that.
I mean the CV. How is like you like the one with a lot of picture, or it's just texting, or?
Yeah, I mean, for me, and I would say probably most of the recruiters at Google, we look at a lot of resumes. So I prefer a very standard format without color, without a bunch of different fonts. I want to be able to like easily read through, where they've been working, what have they achieved there. It should flow very nicely. And I'm not probably going to hire someone because they had a very beautiful resume, like in terms of colors and pictures. I'm going to hire them because of the work that they've done. And in the cover letter itself, if someone writes a letter to the hiring manager or writes a letter to me, again, for me, the CV is just kind of what gets you into the door. Once you're at the interview, I'm not really looking at the CV anymore. I'm asking those questions about the attributes. So the CV is really just your entry point into the interview process. Once you're in the interview process, I'm going to be focusing on your problem-solving skills, your leadership, your Googliness, and maybe your role-related knowledge.
Okay. So is that clear, the answer? I hope it's clear in here, because don't say the name who is, it's just like animals. Okay, we go to the next question. Okay. In here again, one more, animals. So Google has a very high marketing value to potential hires. That's true. So do you have any advice if startup like us can score high potential individuals? It's like, how to say, this is the question, like, because a big company like a Google is like a high marketing value. So it's more interesting for the people that going to apply the job instead of going to apply in a startup. So it's like this is need an advice. How about the startup like us can score a high potential individuals to be in their team?
Well, I don't want to give all the tips on how to compete with me, but I can share. No, that's I think it's a good thing if we have good cross-pollination of talent. I would question the assumption that the best people want to work for a company like Google. Of course, some people are going to aspire to work for a company like Google, but there are very talented people that don't want to work for a large company, right? And if you think about Google now, we are a giant company with more than 100,000 people worldwide. That can be a good attribute for some people, but it can also be a negative for other people. I'm going to join this company where there's already 100,000 people. What is my job going to be? It's going to be to focus on this particular product in this particular region, this particular team. It might feel like a very small thing, whereas in a startup, you have an opportunity to work on a wide range of projects, a wide range of challenges, and you're going to pick up a wide range of skills because you have to, right? Because there's not 100,000 other people who can step in to work on those kinds of things. So I think that there are very talented people that are attracted to startups because they're going to get an opportunity to work on a lot of things, hopefully including recruiting and marketing and sales, and all those things kind of get rolled into every job description if you're working for a startup. So you should use that to your advantage. If you're competing with a large company for talent, say, if you go to that large company, what is your remit going to be? What is the scope of your role? It might be dealing with high amounts of revenue, but it might be in a very narrow area. Whereas if you join this startup, you're going to be working on all these different areas, and you're going to have a direct impact on whether the company is successful in the long term or not. So I think you can use those things to your advantage. And I think that, very talented people are also seeking those things out. It can be tough, to identify those talent if they might not, find your job in a job search. But that's why I think that some of those things like going to events can be crucial, because talented people are also going to those events. And you might come across them in unexpected ways. If you're both passionate about the same thing, if you're passionate about the same technology or the same, social issues, you might find yourself, in the same room with some of those people that could be top talent in those industries, and that could lead to hiring some of them. So I wouldn't say that it's a futile effort to compete with large companies for talent. Talented people want to go in all kinds of places.
Okay, thank you. So I hope this is already answered the question. We go to the next question is Jane again. Jane asking, from what I know, Google sets up coding interviews for roles like software developers and engineers. Okay, are these coding interview considered part of the basic interview process, or are they conducted on the top of the general interview?
Yeah, for that particular job type, it's everyone who interviews for a software engineering job is going to have to go through some coding questions and algorithms, and maybe getting on a whiteboard, or I guess these days probably typing it into your laptop. Coding would be a critical part of the interview process for sure. But we would also look for, even for software engineers, we would be looking for some of those other attributes like Googliness and leadership, because to be successful in Google, you can't just be a person who is an island and a superstar coder working alone. That's not going to lead to a long-term success at Google. You do need to be able to work with other teams. You need to be able to communicate well. You need to be able to. You have to have all of those other 4 attributes to be successful. So maybe one way to look at it is, when we look at those 4 attributes: general cognitive ability, leadership, Googliness, and role-related knowledge. For a software engineer, maybe the coding interview would be kind of like the role-related knowledge component, and it would be a core component of the interview process.
Okay, Jen, is that clear enough for you? Okay, yes, great, thanks. Okay, any other question? Because I think we are almost in the end of the time. Last question, maybe? No? Okay. Okay. I think everyone is already trying to understand what you shared today, Kevin. So if I may make some conclusion that you are trying to share that integrity is most important when we are trying to find the right person joining our company. Don't care, it's like whatever the kind of the business, startups, or which is like a digital startup, food startups, all the creative startups company or whatever. And then it's like a recruitment process will be different from one company to the other's company, depend on the culture, depend on the needs and how urgent the position, because usually it's like the people in a hurry, so they would like to, how to say, before you're already warning about don't sacrifice the quality for the speed. But it's like again back to everyone about which is most important. It's like which is more urgent. And then it's like all the attendance today is like really interesting also to learning about how the Google's like a recruitment process and how it works. It's like maybe we can learn to copy a little bit for us. So once again, thank you everyone. Thank you all the attendants that already joined today's webinar with Kevin. Kevin, thank you again.
I want to say thank you for Kevin and Vita for the lectures, as well as the interesting discussion regarding tips to find, selecting, and assess the best talent. Hopefully it can be beneficial for everyone here. Unfortunately, we have limited time and the time is up for today. But if you have any other question that has not been answered, or you want to connect with Kevin and Vita, you can connect with them through LinkedIn. Now, before we close this event, I will invite Kevin to deliver his closing remarks. Please, Kevin.
All right, thank you so much, Elika, for arranging this, and Vita for moderating. I wish I could bring you to all of my meetings. That was a great summary at the end. Yeah, I guess just a closing comment. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining this. Hopefully, you can see that I'm passionate about talent issues through the conversation today, and I think recruiting, hiring has changed a lot over the last 10 or 20 years to move to a much more kind of scientific approach, and getting much better at finding out what are the ways to find people who are going to be set up for success the most through the interview process. So I hope some of the tips that I've shared today can help you and your companies to recruit talent, and wish you all the best of luck. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kevin. We are so glad to learn about how to hire the best talent from you today. And for everyone who wants to know more about our next webinar and community, you can find it on our social media that is already written in the chat box. We will hold our next webinar talking about Industry 5.0 on October 8th. And we will be more than excited if you want to join us on our next webinar. And for the details, we will update it on our social media. So stay tuned. Also, it will mean so much for this webinar if you feel the pulling at the end of our session, so we can improve the quality of our next webinar. Furthermore, we also have an online group discussion in Telegram. Yes, Telegram. We will have weekly discussion with experts through group chat in Telegram, covering several topics around business, finance, technology, and marketing. We are open to anyone who is interested in entrepreneurship and wants to learn about managing business from the experts. The objective of this online group discussion is to expose members with business knowledge and experience to achieve their goals through discussion. For anyone who wants to join Insight community, we have sent the invitation link in the chat box. We hope to see you there. Thank you again for everyone that has joined and stayed until the end of the session. I would like to thank again our speaker, Kevin, and our moderator, Vita. Also, I want to thank our partner, 1000 Startup Digital and ICT Ministry of Indonesia as our strategic partners, Kumpul as our community partner, Zillion as our media partner, and also Selaksa as our event partner. We cannot make this webinar happen without your support. Okay, I think we arrived at the end of our session. Thank you very much, Kevin and Vita, for today's discussion. Hopefully, we can meet again in the future. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope we will see you again in our next webinar.